Welcome back to the Coffee Nerds. My name is Alejo, and in today's episode, I get the chance to sit with Tim and Roscoe from Seven Syllables Coffee. This is a coffee shop that's located in Cerritos, California, and Tim and Roscoe share a little bit about their journey into the coffee industry and how they built Seven Syllables from an online roaster to a brick-and-mortar coffee shop. And they also share about the amazing community that they surround themselves with. But for now, let's get into the episode and the conversation with Tim and Roscoe. Here we go. Roscoe, Tim, I'm really excited to chat with you today. So Roscoe and Tim are both owners of Seven Syllables Coffee in Cerritos, California. They're taking some time out of the day to chat a little bit about their business. So do you guys want to take a minute and introduce yourselves?
Sure. Yeah. So I am Tim. As you said, I'm one of the owners, one of the co-founders. I also work behind the bar on the weekends. And yeah.
My name is Roscoe. I am also a co-owner and head roaster, among other things. Dishwasher, window cleaner, floor scrubber, handyman,
So you guys have been in business officially for how long?
The brick and mortar store we've had for just about 2 years. But I think we officially launched like the roasting company, I think in 2021.
2020, yeah.
2020.
So that's now, you guys are going about like four years or so?
4 years.
Yeah.
Right.
About 4 years. Yeah.
That's awesome. So now you guys work together officially. You guys have a shop. You guys have a roasting company. Could maybe each of you take a moment and just kind of talk about what got you into coffee? Like how'd you guys end up here?
Oh, man.
Roscoe definitely has a longer history than I do.
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
So my history starts actually with Roscoe because we worked at this coffee shop called It's a Grind Coffee together.
Also down the street from here.
Also down the street, literally down the street from here. But yeah, so I worked there with him and I got into it because he would show me like different coffees and, all that stuff. And actually before that, he used to work, well, I'll let him get into that, like his history, because that's where I first like met him and started kind of getting interested in coffee. But then like, I didn't really dive into it until like he and I worked together at It's a Grind. Once we started working there and he started showing me different stuff, we actually started going to like different coffee shops. I think the first one, like the first specialty coffee shop he actually took me to was Portola Coffee Lab out in Costa Mesa. So we went there and I did not know what I was in for because I think I ordered a shot of espresso, a latte, and a drip coffee, and I was wired beyond beliefs. After that, basically, I got really into it. I was buying like every little thing I could buy, like every single shop I went to, I bought a bag of coffee, and then I went through like 3 or 4 different pour over setups, and then like I bought like a French press. I had like all sorts of stuff. I splurged on a grinder, like, which at the time, like, working minimum wage job, like spending like $300 on a grinder was kind of like, should I really be spending money on that? But I mean, I still have it and still use it today. So after that, I ended up working at the Nordstrom E-Bar at the Cerritos Mall for a little bit. Yeah, so that job was all right. It's probably as like commercial coffee as you could get. And then after I left that, like I finished school, worked a bunch of like office jobs, but all in between that, I was like still making coffee. Like I bought an espresso machine and I was still passionate about it. I was still making coffee like every day, trying new things out. And every single vacation I went with my wife, I literally planned around coffee shops and like different roasters. So yeah, and now we're here.
That's awesome. So Roscoe, let's hear from you about your journey into the coffee industry.
Yeah, so for me, it was kind of on accident. There was this coffee shop near my house, in between my house and Cerritos College, where I was going at the time. And my major was computer science. So I spent all my time at that coffee shop doing programming and like studying and just kind of taking up space in their chairs. One day the manager walked up to me and said, "Hey, you're here all the time. You want to work here? You can still study. You can still do all of that. But you just need to help people when they come in." And I was like, "Okay, sure, why not?" So my first coffee job was entirely on accident. It was not on purpose. At the time, that coffee shop, it was called Coffee Studio, and we were doing pour overs for every cup. We had no batch brewer. We were doing the specialty espresso drinks and like single origin coffees, which at the time was unheard of in this area. I thought it was a pain in the ass at first, but then the more I started looking into it, the more I was like, oh wow, there's a lot of nuance to this. There's a lot of character. There's a lot of variance and flavors between different origins, and there's people that come in from all over the place to have coffee that we're serving in these weird ways. I started to do my own research into that and just got obsessed with the craft of coffee. That was the first shop that I really experienced craft coffee. And after that, I went to It's a Grind, where we worked together. And then after It's a Grind, I went to go work for a shop in Seal Beach called Javatinis. And that was where things really kind of pivoted for me, because I went there with the intention of becoming the roaster for that shop. So that was really where I first learned how to roast. It was on this old like 5-pound air roaster. And after that, I just started researching everything I could about coffee roasting, agricultural side of it, the logistics side of shipping everything, and everything I could learn about coffee as an agricultural product. And after that, I went to go work for a coffee shop called Mackay Coffee. And for a while, I was doing both. I would get up at 4 a.m, ride my bike from Cerritos to Seal Beach to work at Javatini's, work a morning shift there, and then ride my bike to Long Beach to work at Mackay and close the shop there. For both shops, I was just learning as much as I could from as many people as I could. But I would say Mackay Coffee was the first place I experienced real specialty coffee. And that place was really special because it opened a lot of doors for me. Made a lot of friends there that I still talk to today. A lot of friends that are regular guests at the shop here today. So it's crazy to see how those relationships still held up over the years. While I was working at Mackay, we served 3 local Long Beach roasters. We were serving True Bean coffee roasters. We were serving Lord Windsor coffee, and also Rose Park roasters. So that's crucial because Rose Park is actually probably made the biggest impact in my life, period. Andrew and Nathan have been my biggest mentors for a long time. I worked actually for Rose Park for over 10 years, learning as much as I could from Andrew and Nathan, and getting to work with some of the greatest people in Long Beach. And yeah,
I think I remember like when Roscoe was working there, he would like do bicycle deliveries. I remember that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So when I was working for Mackay, I started as a coffee courier. So at one moment in time, I was opening the shop for Javatini's, closing the shop at Mackay, and then doing courier service for Rose Park in the evening, and then biking home after that. So somewhere like 15 to 16-hour days. Then after Mackay Coffee closed, I went to Bakers and Baristas. And there is where I learned, I had a lot of freedom there to experiment and do a lot of cool coffee stuff, and work with a team that was really passionate about, just as passionate as I was about all the details of coffee. So it was a really, really fun place to work. And I worked there all the way up until the pandemic started, which is when we got a little bit more serious about Seven Syllables, and things just started snowballing from there. Some of our first pop-ups were actually at weightlifting gyms, powerlifting gyms, anywhere we could get our hands on where we could serve coffee to people. And it made sense because coffee is kind of a pre-workout, I guess. But yeah, we continued to do pop-ups like that up until we got a regular pop-up at Hillsong Church in LA. And that continued to build the snowball to where we were able to sign the lease for this place. And yeah, still growing, still moving, still learning. Stoked to be here.
So when let's see, I'm trying to go through the timeline. When I first started getting into specialty coffee, this was around 2015.
Okay. Yeah,
I think that's the same year Bakers and Baristas opened up.
that is. Yeah. So Eric and Joe, great friends of mine, great mentors. They were at Mackay asking a lot of questions about coffee, and I was caught off guard because not a lot of our guests at the time were asking those kind of in-depth questions. And I was like, "Are you guys opening a coffee shop or something?" They're like, "Actually, yeah, we're opening in Cerritos." And I was like, "I live in Cerritos. Are you guys hiring?" And yeah, so they brought me on to be one of the first baristas along with a couple other friends.
I think at the time, I didn't really know a whole lot of coffee shops. I think Intelligentsia and Portola were like the only two out here that I could think of, and you had to drive pretty far to get to them.
We went to Intelligence
Yeah.
all the time.
Yeah, and then I mean, like there were like a lot of like other like hole in the wall shops out in LA at the time, but I mean, I think a lot of them are kind of defunct now.
Yeah, Handsome Coffee Roasters
Yeah,
was one of
that
my
was-
favorites. Cognoscente is still killing it, I think.
G&B.
Cog Coffee, G&B is still doing their thing. Yeah, there's so many really good shops out there. And
So when Bakers came into Cerritos, I think that was like really the only specialty coffee shop in this area. I enjoyed that, like what you guys were doing there at the time. You guys had 4 Barrel.
oh, well, you were there in the beginning. Yeah. 4 Barrel, Ritual.
Yeah.
We had Heart,
Yeah, Ritual, Heart. Yeah, I remember Heart.
George Howell, and for like a brief period of time, we were also serving Tim Wendelbo.
Wow, that's a lot of history. So Tim, you mentioned your first drink or your first specialty coffee was like an espresso.
It was, we called it the gauntlet. It was a espresso, a latte, and a drip coffee.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, all
And
in one sitting.
And that's what reeled you in, huh?
Yeah, I think it was just like, I think when I first tried it, Roscoe was like, pay attention to the flavors. And, you know, like, I didn't like just gulp it down. So I took a sip and I was like, whoa, how does coffee taste this good?
Yeah.
I kind of had a little bit of that experience when he worked at Coffee Studio, but I think at the time I was kind of more like, I was still a college student trying to be like, I just need coffee. I need, you know, like I wasn't really like, I was like, oh, let me just get the cheapest drip coffee, you know, and I'll just sit here and hang out and study. But like when I like intentionally, like, you know, went to get coffee with intention, like that kind of changed things because now I'm like, okay, let me pay attention. And yeah, it was interesting. I was like trying to replicate that at home, you know, that whole experience, like basically chasing the dragon at home.
What was your first specialty coffee drink, Roscoe?
I had a siphon from Portola Coffee Lab that caught me off guard because of how they brewed. They did it under these halogen lamps at the time, and I'd never seen a siphon in my life before that. So that really attracted me to the coffee scene. And that was, I think, one of the first or second years that I was dating my girlfriend, who is now currently my wife. She bought me a siphon that I still have today because of that experience. I think it was Ethiopia RD, natural process RD from Portola Coffee Lab. So that was one of my first experiences, for sure.
Yeah, speaking of coffee, I am drinking your Bolivia. This thing is really good.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
It's very delicate. Like I really like when I see tasting notes that I don't typically see. So this one has cotton candy, grape. That one really caught my eye. I remember when you guys first started, I think you were still working at Baker's at the time. And I believe they were selling your stuff on the shelf.
Yeah.
And yeah, I can't remember if I bought from the shelf or if I bought from online, but I just remember really enjoying the coffee and just really enjoying the fact that it's a small business was popping up. I didn't even know you guys at the time, but it was it's just cool seeing businesses open up around the area that focus attention on providing really quality beans. So that was a fun journey.
Well, that's awesome. I'm happy we can be a part of that, for sure.
What was the first idea, or when was the first idea that you guys both got on starting a roasting business?
I mean, I don't even think it was like initially the idea wasn't even roasting. Like when we worked at Instagram together, it was almost kind of like a running joke. Like we'd just be like, hey, wouldn't it be funny if we opened a coffee shop together?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, ideally we wanted to open it up where It's a Grind was, and we'd be like, man, this would be rad. This is such a good spot.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously that never happened, but yeah, no, like we kind of planted that seed back in like 2011. So
Yeah, and I think what really lit the fire was when we went to Coffee Fest in San Francisco.
oh yeah, Barista Nation or something like
Yeah.
yeah. Like we kind of just went on a whim. We were like, hey, let's check this out. Like, see all these people, give like keynote speeches on the different aspects of the coffee industry. The top speaker was like the founder of Ritual. And she was talking about like how, as someone who is from the younger generation, like starting a coffee shop and all the challenges that come along with it.
Yeah, and I think in the beginning we had people over to my mom's house and we brewed coffee for them. I think we were brewing Lord Windsor coffee at that little, I don't want to say it was a pop-up or an event, but we brewed for our friends. But I think we were calling it puzzles in the beginning.
Yeah, because of that How I Met Your Mother episode.
I think the original idea was to be a multi-roaster and serve the best coffee roasters that we could find. But I just kept getting hungry for more and more positions in the coffee industry. I've held every position from barback to barista to cafe manager to apprentice roaster, head production roaster, green buyer. And I just, after that, decided that I wanted to do the roasting myself.
So as you started fleshing out what a roaster looked like, what were some resources that you leaned on to learn and to kind of like hone in on that skill?
In 2012, there really wasn't much other than home barista forums. There was a book called Home Coffee Roaster by Kenneth David. That was a huge help. Reddit forums. There honestly really wasn't very much out there. It seemed like it was kind of a close guarded secret for a long time. And then one day I was talking to the owner of Portola and said I wanted to get into roasting too. He's told me that they actually sell green coffee, and if I wanted to buy a pound of raw green coffee from him, I could do that. So I did that, and I brought it home and realized I don't know how I'm going to roast it. So I ended up roasting it out of a wok that my mom had in the kitchen, just constantly stirring it for like 15 minutes until it went from green to brown. And actually I have a picture of that on my Instagram from a long time ago. But I remember how smoky it made the kitchen. I have a huge family, and I think the smoke in the house pissed everyone off because the whole house was covered in smoke. Yeah, so it was a really cool experience, but I never roasted in that wok again. After that, I decided that I want to keep roasting. So while I was working for Javatini's, learning roasting from him, I sold the bike that I was using to get to work to buy a Huki 500. I think that's how you say it. It was a small little 1 pound drum roaster. And I used that early on to be kind of the main roaster for the business. I remember we tried to do a coffee roasting business, I think in 2014, but we were both so busy that we ended up just putting that away for a while up until 2020.
Tim, do you do any roasting?
I do enjoy watching Roscoe do it, and he does, like, whenever I do come over to the roastery, he does explain what he's doing, what everything is, and even if I'm not doing it, it's extremely fascinating just to like watch. And I like, if you ever I don't know if you ever watched a roaster work, it's pretty interesting if you're like, pun intended, a coffee nerd.
Yeah. Like I said, back then it was like impossible to find resources. There was that Kenneth David's book, and then some books by Scott Rao that gave brief explanations, but nothing super in depth. So I remember initially sending an email to Rose Park Roasters and saying, hey, can I hang out at the roastery and just like watch and ask questions? So he said, yeah. And I drove all the way out to Tustin to watch him roast on this 15 kilo Diedrich that was in the middle of a busy cafe, trying to get my questions out to him while he was also trying to roast. And then also everyone in the shop was talking and the music was going. So I sat there taking notes, trying to ask as many questions as I could. And eventually I joined the Rose Park team on the production side, not behind the bar. And that's really where I started to accelerate my knowledge of roasting through Andrew. So I was an apprentice under Andrew from Roast Park, and he taught me so much, and I'm forever grateful for that relationship.
What is the hardest thing about roasting coffee?
Uh, so the fundamentals themselves are not difficult. You just have to understand like basic thermodynamics, how heat transfers from the roaster to the seeds, and then when you know how to operate the roaster, all that stuff is fundamental. I think the hardest part really is palate development. Um, Not enough people cup their coffees every day, and if they do, they're only cupping their coffees. So if you're not exploring other people's coffee or chasing everyone else's, or even expanding your palate in a general sense, like with different foods, I think that's the hardest part, really, more than anything. Yeah, and confidence. I don't think I've ever been happy with anything I've roasted, but other people like it, so that's cool.
I'm gonna say you're making other people happy, but
Yeah, yeah. As long as everyone else likes it, it's cool. But I feel like I'm always chasing better.
Yeah, every time Roscoe brought home like brought a roast for me to try, he was always like, "Oh, it could be better." And I was like, "Dude, no, this is amazing!" Like, and he's like, "No, it could be better." And then as soon as he brings like that tweaked roast, I'm like, "Holy crap! How did you like make it even better?" And it just keeps getting better and better and better. And like, I gotta commend Roscoe on that because it's just like crazy how he's able to just do that, and it just keeps going and going. And like anytime like like me or like anyone else give him feedback on the beans, he's always like, okay, I know what to tweak, like I know how to like fix that, and then next roast comes, I'm like, oh crap, you fixed it. Like
Yeah, yeah. I always appreciate constructive feedback from our guests and from our staff and from friends and family. Um, yeah, I think having confidence in what you're doing probably is the second hardest thing, being a roaster.
well, it seems like you're doing well at that. So if that means anything.
Well, thank you, thank you. I'll be better next week.
Okay. I like that. I like that. That's a good I don't know, that should be like a t-shirt or something like that. I'll be better next week. Roscoe, you said that you were still working at Baker's and and Rose Park. Tim, actually I don't even know if we got to what you do on the side, but
that time I think when we first like started like the company seriously, I was still doing sales for my current day job. Now I do all sorts of stuff, but like at the time I was focused on sales and doing wholesale. And I think that's kind of where we got the idea for like starting out doing wholesale and online sales, because that's essentially what I was doing at my day job. And I was like, you know, 2020 pandemic, like it's not like we could have started a shop because everything was closed, So we're like, hey, Roscoe can roast, and then we'll sell online, we'll wholesale to like people. Like I know one of our first wholesale accounts was actually one of my cousins, like husband. He was like making like cold brew coffee with our beans and like delivering it. And yeah, at the time we would take online orders because people were like had a lot of time in 2020. So obviously like people got into like coffee and learning how to make coffee. So we were like, hey, let's bring the coffee to them. And that way they could get it like next day or the same day. That's kind of how we started out.
Yeah, during the pandemic when no one was leaving their houses, I still continued to work since I was normally in the warehouse by myself. And we started a subscription service called Trustfall. And a lot of people signed up for that. And we offered on the website free contactless delivery because that was the most popular thing at the time was contactless delivery. And that was a huge game changer for us. Surprised at how many of my family and personal friends subscribed and supported and continued to support. And even now, all the invoices that get printed from back in the day still say free contactless delivery, even though that term seems to have disappeared. Yeah, that's kind of how we cut our teeth in the beginning.
wow. So really you guys kind of had your start during the pandemic, but purely as a roaster, you did wholesale. Um, so as businesses started opening up post pandemic, Let's talk about that a little bit. Did you guys always have your sights on opening up a brick and mortar?
I think we kind of had it like in the back of our
Yeah.
minds. It wasn't like set in stone. Like I think we always that was kind of what we aimed for, but I think at one point we were like throwing around like, oh, we should just do like a coffee truck or something like that,
Yeah.
or like just yeah, there was like a whole lot of other things like we were just throwing around just to kind of see what we wanted to do. But I think once the shop became a bit more feasible, we were kind of like just set on that.
Yeah, for me, I don't think I wanted a brick and mortar in the beginning. I knew that we had agreed on that in the beginning, but managing a shop and then watching somebody else open a shop, I saw all the stress that came with it. And in my head, I just wanted to be an online roaster. Um, and I think during the pandemic that worked for a little bit. But I think like everyone else, we were missing the face to face interaction with people. And so we did the pop ups at the gyms and at Hillsong. And then I think really what catalyzed it for me, because we had talked about opening shop over and over again over the years, and it was always there was always something in the way. I had to finish school first, or I had to wait until I learned more, wait until we built up enough capital, wait until I felt confident about the stuff that I was roasting, wait until we could buy a lot more coffee because what if we run out? And I think there was always an excuse as to why we didn't actually go for it. Something that I was always putting in front of myself that would be in the way. Um, and the thing that kind of erased all of those excuses was my wife and I found out that we were pregnant, and that was the defining moment where I said, if we don't do this now, then we're never gonna do it. So kind of hastily signed the lease, and things have been snowballing ever since.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how fast that like process, like in that small time period, like everything just happened. And I know like it was like stressful for both of us. And I mean, I'm gonna be honest, like there definitely it wasn't like all like sunshines and rainbows during that time.
That was hard for
Yeah,
sure. For
like
sure.
but I think just sticking through with it and just looking at the big picture versus like all the little moments is kind of like what kept both of us going for sure. You know, having to remind each other like, hey, look, we're not just doing this just for us. We're trying to do this for our families. To provide and then also serve our community, and this is really what we want to do. So
Yeah, we built a nice little community here. We both grew up in Cerritos, so it felt right to be here, and the guests that come through daily really make it worth it for us.
Yeah, just really cool kind of hearing from both of your perspectives, just the steps. That's just really interesting. You had like a defining moment, like it's either all in or it's never going to happen. So, what do you think is the biggest challenge just operating a shop compared to being mainly online?
probably just all the hats you have to wear, running the company. There's always fires that you have to put out every day, you know, a lot of difficult things that, happen along the way that you're just kind of like, you have to just face it head on. There's so many things. It's really hard to pick one thing, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
For me, the biggest challenge going from online only to a brick and mortar is all of the administrative work that goes into it. I don't spend that much time behind the bar anymore. That's where all the fun happens. That's where the face-to-face stuff and talking to all the people and building that community, that stuff is really fun. And I miss a lot of that stuff. But now most of my time is spent on the computer doing administrative work, making sure we have enough green coffee to roast throughout the week, making sure all of our wholesale clients are taken care of, and all of the little details that I never thought I wanted to do before, like all the accounting stuff, is not fun to me, but it's stuff that needs to be done for sure. Keeping track of our margins has been really tough because we want to provide stuff at a reasonable price, but we also want to offer the best possible product that we can. So finding that balance in between being cost efficient, but also offering the highest quality stuff that we can find has been really tough. I would say transitioning from online only to brick and mortar has been really good for cash flow. I think even though the profits are a little bit better for doing the online only side, I think brick and mortar is better for cash flow, and for just like we keep reiterating, building that sense of community. Being face to face with our guests has been really, really cool, especially since we started as online only. It was hard to get that like personal touch to everything that we did. So those are just a few of the challenges. I would just say that I'm happy where we are. Grateful for all the support that we've had through the years, and yeah, I just hope that we continue to be a part of this community for as long as we can.
I'm curious what your guys' thoughts are on like the coffee industry being quote unquote prestigious, and is there a gap between just consumers' knowledge of coffee and then specialty coffee, and are there any ways that we can close that gap?
Oh man. Um, well, prestigious, yes. I think specialty coffee can be prestigious, but the difference between coffee today and coffee as it was when we first started was the pretentiousness. That sucked. If you walked in as a consumer and you didn't know anything and you were asking questions to baristas, back then it was a lot of like scoffing and a lot of like gatekeeping of, oh, this is something that only professional baristas know, and as a consumer you're not going to do as well as we do here. So the pretentiousness, I think, thank God, has died, and we're entering this new era of hospitality first, and I think that's something that I personally have also shifted. I think all good baristas should know all of the details about the coffee, but we're not shoving it down people's throats. We're not pretending like we're better than anyone else. The most important part, I think, to bridge that gap is just hospitality. Share all the information that you can, have recommendations that you can. For a while, I had all of my resources, all the books that I had out in the customer area for people to grab, different books about all things coffee related, from fundamentals to the in-depth specifics of espresso extraction to water for coffee, building a specific water profile to brew with, to like origin stories. I had all that out there, but the health department said we can't have it out there. So now it's back in my office. But that stuff I'm always happy to share with people for sure. That's the easiest way to bridge the gap, is just focus on hospitality.
Yeah, and to piggyback on that, I mean, Roscoe's worked in the industry like deeper in the industry than I have. So I think when we started the business, I kind of approached it more as like an outsider consumer. The way I viewed it was like, all right, if I didn't know anything about coffee, like how would I want to like view specialty coffee, from looking from the other side? Because I mean, I think when you get really deep into like something, you kind of get into like the jargon and everything that, a regular consumer wouldn't understand. And I think obviously part of that hospitality is like trying to explain that into like layman's terms, which is, a lot of that, even to this day, like when people ask for like recommendations for like coffee, like I try to explain it to them in a way that is easy for them to understand, is like that they can relate to. Because I think when you start just explaining things like as if you're, working in the industry, grading coffees and stuff like that, like I think some of that kind of gets lost a little bit. I mean, obviously there's a place for that, behind the scenes, but like front facing, I think people just want to be able to like relate to it and understand like, oh, this is really good for like espresso. This is good for coffee. Like, because I think the one thing I get a lot of people asking me is like, oh, which one's like fruitier? Which one's more chocolatey? Like, I think those are like the kinds of questions that more people tend to ask rather than, oh, how's the acidity on that? What's the mouthfeel? Like being able to translate all that into something that like customers can understand is, I feel like, one of the biggest goals for us for sure. Because like Roscoe said, I feel like that pretentiousness definitely turned off a lot of people back then, and we're always trying to remove that stigma and make people feel welcome. As soon as they walk into our shop, make them feel like, hey, we'll talk to them and ask them if they have any questions, and definitely opens up a lot of conversations about coffee as far as what beans we have. Even people who don't have no idea what like the brewers we have are like, oh, what's that, or like, oh, what kind of machine is that? Like people start to ask a bunch of questions just because like they feel more comfortable like talking to us. And I mean, you've been to the shop, you've seen our bar. That's kind of why we wanted to have a machine that isn't like this, where you just see the barista's eyes. Like we want you to be able to look at us and talk to us and have a conversation with us, because I think that was like the main goal of our shop. Is just we want to be able to not just establish a community, but like be able to like help educate and bring in more people.
Exactly. Yeah. So you've seen our espresso machine is it's a mod bar. It's built into the counter. You don't have this big box on the countertop. Like Tim said, it was intentional. It was designed so that we could have a more direct conversation with guests rather than trying to peek over an espresso machine.
Nice. I like that. What I'm hearing is you just meet people where they're at, no matter where they're at. I think that's what I really love about, some of the people that I've been talking to lately, is just that open idea of just being approachable. Roscoe, you mentioned the word humility. Tim, you're more in like just being approachable and just kind of like removing that stigma of any pretentiousness. And then behind all the coffee is just the people. I mean, you guys are working every day, connecting with customers, and maybe you're not behind the counter as much as you used to before, but there's still that sense of trying to create an environment that creates those moments. Yeah. So real quick before we transition to this last part, for those that are brand new to coffee, what would you say to this person to help them gain a deeper appreciation for specialty coffee?
I would say do your research. Look deeper at the industry as a whole, not just coffee shops, but all the way back to origin. There's a lot of hands that touch coffee, from the seed that's planted to the trees that need to be taken care of and nurtured and processed, to the companies that are in charge of shipping it all the way to us, to the roasters that need to take care of it really well and roast it in a way that brings out the best character in the coffee, to the baristas who are the final step between the coffee industry professional and the guest. I would say just take a moment to look at each step from seed to cup and think about everything that went into making one cup of coffee. One of my mentors used to say that a good cup of coffee is an absolute miracle. There are so many steps from origin to shops all over the world that a good cup of coffee truly is a miracle. So just take a step to pause and reflect about that, and as long as you enjoy it, that's all that matters.
I really like that.
I can't take credit for that. That's Andrew told me that.
Well, we'll make sure to shout out to Andrew at Rose Park for that one. So Roscoe, you told me
Yes.
that you're not just a barista, but you are a barbell barista.
Yeah.
So tell me a little bit about that.
I started doing Olympic lifting in 2017. At the time, I was still working full-time as a barista as well. So I started this entire lifting page called Barbell Barista, where it's mainly just lifting stuff, but every once in a while I would post videos about brewing coffee. This was before we had decided to open the shop. And I still have that page. I don't really post much there, but yeah, if you want to follow Barbell Barista, I'm there.
Tim, do you lift at all?
Casually at the gym. That's about as much as I do.
Well, yeah, you may not lift weights, but sounds like you in the past you were lifting some beats.
Yeah.
A radio. I don't know. I'm still kind of like wrapping my mind around that. But tell me a little bit about your past. So you were a DJ radio host.
Well, I DJed on a radio show. It was on 90.7 FM, and it was like at 3 a.m., 4 a.m.
4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like with some of my friends from like high school, and I don't know how we got that show, but we were like playing a lot of like drum and bass, dubstep, a lot of like, and we had like a very eclectic taste in music. So we were playing like a lot of experimental, like one of the guys we were like that would DJ with us, he played like Indian sitar music sometimes, and then transitioned that into like house music. So it's kind of cool.
That's so interesting. What got you into radio?
Honestly, like it kind of just like happened. I really don't know how it like a lot of my friends that I was around got into like electronic music, and I think one of my friend's older brothers who's the host of the show. He met someone in Long Beach, and he happened to like have the radio show, and he was like, I'm gonna be done with it. I need someone to take over, and that's kind of how he got into it. Yeah, we just all had like the same like musical tastes, and they asked me to come on like one weekend, and it turned into like a couple of years on the radio. So yeah, so I did a little bit of like dubstep and drum and bass production. I got into it because like back then, well, Roscoe and I used to be in a band together. That's kind of where the Seven Syllables Coffee name came from, because our band was originally called Seven Syllables Spoken. And I actually incorporated a lot of like electronic like music in there. Like I had my laptop, and I played guitar too, but like I also like had backing tracks and stuff so that I produced. So that kind of like transitioned into that.
Oh, cool. Man, we could get like a whole jam session on right now.
Yeah, we could.
I was gonna say we should have just went to your house. That would have been fun.
Yeah.
Right, yeah, just set up in the garage.
You have a drum set there?
I do. It's probably collecting a ton of dust right now, but yes, I do.
Perfect. We'll be right over.
Wow. Okay, so you guys played in a band together. So Tim, you played guitar. Roscoe, did you play drums? I don't know. I'm just guessing.
I played the drums. Yeah.
Okay, that's cool. So you guys were laying down music together, and now you lay down coffee together. But yeah, so as we kind of wrap things up, just curious, other than what you're drinking in your hand right now, when you're not in the shop, what are you guys usually brewing at home?
I mean, mostly our stuff, like I always rotate every offering every week, just, so I can kind of stay refreshed on it. But I do have friends that always bring over, like that travel a lot, and they always bring me like the last thing I had, one of my friends brought stuff from Japan. I couldn't remember the name of the roaster, but it was like, I believe it was in El Salvador, and it was probably the most interesting thing I ever tasted, because it literally tasted like straight up bananas. So but yeah, usually I'm brewing whatever we have roasted here most of the time. My wife in particular, whenever I make espresso, she is a huge fan of 49th Parallel from Vancouver, because she has family out there and we go there pretty often. So I always try to bring back some of that home, and they have like at any time like 5 or 6 different espresso offerings. So I try to bring like all of those home and try those out along with a lot of other stuff. The closest specialty coffee roaster to my work is Clutch Coffee. So I'm always trying out their stuff to kind of like see what they have. They have some pretty good stuff every now and then. I prefer brewing it at home, because then at least if if it doesn't taste like how I expected it to, at least I know I messed it up, But yeah, that's pretty much what I'm drinking at home.
Yeah, for me, I don't drink coffee at home unless I have a caffeine headache. Most of the time, I start the morning with yerba mate, because I'm here Monday through Friday. I save my coffee for when I get to the shop. But at home, I usually drink yerba mate or matcha when I wake up. I know that's probably not what most people expect from a coffee roaster, but yeah.
But that I mean, that makes sense if you're around coffee all day. Yeah, and you're probably cupping every so often as well, so yeah, I get it.
Once a week, we try and cup every Friday. I'll probably make that public soon. But yeah, we try and cup every Friday.
So, Roscoe, I know you mentioned that you don't brew coffee at home, but what is your home brewing setup when you do brew coffee at home?
Yeah, so I've had the same Baratza Virtuoso grinder since 2013. So that is the grinder that stays on the counter. When I do brew, I have a Oria V3 that I use to brew with, and I use Kalita filters for that. I think the Kalita filters work well with the Oria if you um, make sure to flatten it against the sides. Uh, and then just a basic like Bonavita kettle that I've had for 10 years. My setup's pretty simple at home. Nothing fancy.
Nice. What about you, Tim? What do you what's your home brewing setup like?
So my home brewing setup is actually pretty similar to the shops. I use the origami at home, which is what we use here. I use Kalita filters at home. I also have a Virtuoso Barazza that I've had for, I think, like 13 years that I bought at Portola. And honestly, like, not sponsored, but that Barazza has been like my go-to recommendation for everyone because they're like totally serviceable. So like I've been just changing the burrs like every other year, honestly. And I broke it once and I sent it in for repair and like they sent it back after like 3 or 4 days, like almost like it was brand new. So, but yeah, for drip coffee, that's kind of my setup at home. Because my wife drinks coffee every day and occasionally my brother-in-law, I drink coffee every day. And then every so often, like when I go through those phases, like I do have an espresso machine at home. I have a Nova Simonelli Oscar 2. And then I also have another Barazza grinder for espresso, the Sete 270. And yeah, that's pretty much what I use.
When you guys are hosting a large amount of people at your house, do you ever brew coffee or do you ever offer coffee for parties? I'm curious what you guys do for that when that does happen, because you're not going to do pour overs like for every single person that that comes through your door.
Yeah, for me, like anytime I have guests over at the house, the first thing they always ask me is, "Hey, can you make me a latte?" Because a lot of people that come over to my house already know I have an espresso machine. So I always keep both types of milks ready. Like I have like whole milk and oat milk always on deck in my fridge because I always have like surprise guests over the week, like that like, "Oh, I'm in town. Like, can we swing by your house?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And they're like, "Can I get coffee before I like drive down or drive back up home?" And I'm like, "Yeah, you got it." So I'm always
Love
willing
it.
to, as long as I have beans. If I don't have beans, then obviously I'm like, but I usually try to have beans and try to have it all like usually dialed in so that whenever I have guests over, I already have coffee for them.
Yeah, for me, I
That's
used to
cool.
this guy here, Tim, scoot over for a second. This used to live in my garage, and so I would when people would come over, I would just brew batches of coffee. This is a
Okay.
Curtis G3, I think. Yeah, that lived in my garage for a long time before we had the shop. So when we had family over, I was brewing batches, just like that. Now, because I live like 5 minutes from the shop, I usually just come here, fill a couple of to-go containers, and bring it back to the house. It's just easier that way.
And then just from the business standpoint, if you were to give one tip to anybody that's aspiring to build a business or someone aspiring to build a coffee shop, what would be your number one tip for them?
Find a good mentor, for sure, or a set of mentors. Um, you can read as many books as you want. You can watch all the YouTube videos about how to run a successful business, but the biggest difference you're ever going to get is to have a good mentor, for sure. I've been blessed enough to have a lot of those in my life, and it's made a huge impact into who I am today and how we run the business. Um, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I'd say my tip is just, I know it sounds kind of cliche, but just trust the process. Like if it's something you really want to do, just everything will fall into place. And if it doesn't, there's always tomorrow. So
Guys, this was really fun. Before we stop for the day, can you just tell everybody where they can find you online, in person? Go ahead and tell everybody where you're at.
So we're in Cerritos. Our shop's address is 13307 Artesia Boulevard, Cerritos, California, 90703. We do sell beans in store. We also sell online at sevensyllablescoffee.com, all spelled out, no numbers. So that's where you can find us.
Well, I'll be sure to link to all your website, your socials in the description. But this was a lot of fun, guys. I really appreciate you guys carving out some time, talk a little bit of shop, and have a little fun at the same time. I don't know if we're gonna hear some of your beats, Tim, in the shop anytime soon.
I do have some stuff on Spotify, but you'd have to come into the shop and ask about that. I'm not going to put that out there right now.
Well, yeah, good stuff. Thanks again, guys. Hope you guys have a good night.
Yeah, it was great talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Hey guys, thanks for listening, and I hope you enjoyed this conversation. If you did, please like this video. And if you'd like to see more content like this, definitely subscribe so that you don't miss out on any future episodes. We would love to hear from you, so please leave a comment, or you can reach out to us on email at hello@thecoffeenerds.co. You can visit us on our website at thecoffeenerds.co, or you can follow us on Instagram at thecoffeenerds. We hope you join us again soon as we continue to have real conversations with real coffee nerds. Cheers.